Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. Today is July the 15th, 2026. Today I want to discuss the path to law school in America. So I've had several friends who've expressed interest in attending law school in America. And of course, law school in America is different from other jurisdictions, right? So it's different from the path to law school in America is different from the path in Nigeria. It's different from the path in the United Kingdom. Um, while in Nigeria and the United Kingdom, um, qualifying as what they call a barrister in Nigeria and a barrister in the UK requires just a bachelor's degree in law, right? A bachelor's degree, or in the case of the UK, doing a law conversion course, right? If you don't earn a bachelor's degree in law, and the process is different. Um, and then in Nigeria, a bachelor's degree in law typically takes 5 years to earn a bachelor's degree in law. And then after that, you go to what's called the Nigerian Law School, which is about 18 months, right? So you're looking at over 6 years, almost seven, right? Almost 7 years just to get uh, the degree and be qualified and be called to the bar. Now, that process is different from the process in the United States. I could do a video and talk about the process in the UK and the process in Nigeria, but I want to help my friends here in the US who are interested in going to law school in America. So the process in America is different. You can't earn a first degree in law in America. You've heard of people who have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. That's not the same thing as getting a law degree. A criminal justice bachelor's degree is not a degree in law, and it doesn't qualify you to take the bar exam or to call yourself a lawyer, right, or an attorney. Now, if you also notice in Nigeria and the UK, I use the terms barrister, right? In America, they're not called barristers. Now, in the universe of the legal profession, everybody in all jurisdictions that specialize in law or appearing in the court or whatnot, being legal representatives or advocates, they're called lawyers, right? People who are trained in the law, they're called lawyers. That's a broad universe. Now, but each jurisdiction would have their requirements to practice and represent individuals. In the UK, in Nigeria specifically, they call them barristers. In the UK, they have a two-tier system. They have solicitors, right, who negotiate, solicit the clients, and they have barristers who represent clients at the highest courts of law in criminal cases, more complex cases in the UK. Like I said, I'll do a separate video and explain the differences. But in the United States, um, again, the broad universe is called a lawyer. Like, I'm a lawyer. I've done a video explaining I'm a lawyer, not an attorney. All attorneys are lawyers. Not all lawyers are attorneys. So attorneys are the term we use in America. We don't have barristers in America. We don't have solicitors. We have attorneys. So attorney is someone who practices law, who is an officer of the court. They've been called to a state bar. Like, each state has its bar, right, in America, because in America, each state is really, we have a federal system. So each state is sovereign, has its own sovereignty, right, and has its own laws, its own constitution, its own courts, its own legal system. And attorneys are called to the bar in a specific state's um, legal system, in a specific state's court. They're officers of a specific state's court. Now, they can be officers of multiple courts, right? But they have to take an oath for each one, and they have to do what's called waive-in or whatever, meet the requirements for each state in which they can represent a client. And they're called attorneys. So after law school, and again, the other thing is, like I said, in Nigeria, for instance, or in the UK, you can have your first degree in law to qualify to be a lawyer, or right, or barrister, as a first degree. That's not the situation in the United States. The first professional law degree is a graduate program in America. It's So that's why they call it a doctorate level program. So it's a professional doctorate called the Juris Doctor. That's what America awards. And you can't do it as a first degree. You have to have at least a bachelor's degree first. So you have to have completed a bachelor's degree. It could be in anything. It could be a bachelor's degree in drama, in literature, in English. It could be anything in mathematics, right? There's no requirement for the degree you should get that bachelor's in, but you must have a 4 year a bachelor's degree first of all, right? Before you can then apply to law school and be accepted to one of America's. I think America has about 198 ABA approved law schools. That's American Bar Association approved law schools, about 198 of them. I graduated from George Washington University Law School in DC, in Washington DC. That's the nation's capital, and of course, it's one of the most expensive places to live in America. And so I got the Juris Doctor degree. So first of all, you get a bachelor's. It can be from anywhere. It doesn't matter where you get your bachelor's degree from. And then most law schools, it used to be an absolute requirement. You had to take the LSAT. That's Law School Admissions Test. Everybody has to take it because American schools like to have a fair process to compare their students because there are limited spaces in law school, right? So they ask you to take an admissions test, right? You have to take just like for medical doctors, after they have their bachelor's degree and they want to go to med school in America, you have to take what's called the MCAT. The equivalent for law school is the LSAT, right? The Law School Admissions Test. So you have to take that exam, and then schools will look at your score and your undergraduate degree and then your references. So those things are all very important. And then you take an essay, you write them an essay why you want to go to law school. So each law school has its admissions council, right? Its board that determines if you will be a right fit for their school if they want you, right? And so that's very expensive. Law school is very expensive. The process of taking the LSAT is very expensive. People normally register with a law school admissions test preparation course, right? The popular ones are test masters, right? There's test masters. There is the more generic is Kaplan, and this is not a plug for them. So people take these. They take these preparation courses, LSAT preparation courses, because it familiarizes candidates with the LSAT process, and it helps give them a more competitive score. So after that, that's expensive. That package is expensive. It might cost maybe $2,000, $3,000, right? It depends on which program you're taking. Some people actually hire private tutors to tutor them for the LSAT, which is far more expensive. So law school is not something for the indigent or the poor, even though they try and say, well, they want to provide opportunities for low-income people to get into law school as well. In America, it's very expensive. It's a very expensive process. So, as I said, law school is very expensive, right? Law school is extremely expensive. The tuition for my school, where I graduated from, George Washington University, currently is over $78,000 for just tuition, right? $78,000 a year. So law school takes 3 years of full-time study, 3 years of full-time study. So $78,000 a year just for tuition. Overall, they advertise the cost of annual enrollment as about $114,000 or over that, and the total cost of attendance, which they advertise, is roughly $342,000 for just 3 years of law school. I'd say it's more expensive than that because I saw their cost of room and board. Room and board, it means the cost of your accommodation and then the cost of your feeding. DC is one of the most expensive places to live in America because, of course, the nation's capital is right there, and George Washington University is right there in Washington, D.C. It's right to the White House, next to the World Bank, next to the IMF, and we don't have on-campus housing facilities, so people have to rent from DC. I remember when I was in law school. I graduated from law school in 2019, right? So I was in law school between 2016 and 2019, um, and at one time I stayed, you know, walking distance from campus, right? Because in my first semester or so, I had lived far away in another state to cut, the cost of accommodation. It was terrible for me because I had a 5 hour commute. That's a conservative estimate, right? A minimum of 5 hour commute to and fro. 5 hours daily gone from your study time, in law school is terrible, right? It puts you at a severe disadvantage. So I moved and got an accommodation close to my law school, walking distance, just behind my law school. It cost me just a small studio, and I was lucky because the person I was, somebody was leaving, and so I got it at a very cheap price. Somebody couldn't fulfill their contract. I was paying $3,000 a month for a tiny studio, $3,000 a month, and this was, in like 2017 thereabouts. That's about 10 years ago. Right now, it's more expensive, right? And so the claims that room and board, so $3,000 a month, that was 10 years ago, right? That's $36,000, right, to live for housing for a tiny studio, right? Of course, people can share. You can share with someone, but I didn't share. It was a studio anyway. But it's very expensive. So I'd say the cost of attendance at George Washington University advertises about 342,000, over 340,000 for the total 3 year cost of attending law school. I'd say add 50,000. It's 50 to 60,000. I'd say $400,000 is more accurate. Now, so you see, law school is very expensive, so not everybody can go, and this is pretty much. There are other schools that are more expensive. Of course, George Washington University was once the most expensive school in America in the 2000s, right? It was once the most expensive. So their law school is one of the most expensive. But there are many law schools that are more expensive that are, Columbia, in New York, in different places, University of Chicago Law School. But what about law schools that are not up there? Again, law school is very expensive. Basically, it's very expensive. There's an extremely rare instance of University of District of Columbia, which is in DC. But University of District of Columbia is unranked. It's an unranked school. Basically, it's when they say you're unranked, you are basically amongst the lowest, right? So there are 198 law schools, so it could be ranked the lowest, maybe 196, 197, 194, from 180 below, downwards, right? So the bar passage rate is less than 50% of first-time test takers. They don't have that many spots, right? Because they don't have that many faculty, right? Their faculty, their lecturers, roughly 25 full time, right? And they have some, part time. So they only have about, just less than 83 spots a year, right? Less than 83 spots a year for students. My law school was much larger, right? I think about 500 spots a year. Harvard Law, for people who are interested in Harvard, I think Harvard's about 550 a year. I think Harvard has the largest class, right? The largest entry class per year. So law school is expensive. It can cost between 200,000 and 400,000 and over 400. So 200,000 to $500,000, right? For the 3 years of law school. So if we were to say so University of District of Columbia advertises that its tuition per year for in-state people who are DC residents, they live in DC, they're DC residents, they qualify as DC residents, is about just over 13,000, roughly $14,000 a year, right? Um, so that's roughly over $40,000, right? For tuition, just for tuition. So you see again, and DC basically, so they for people who live in DC, so they're paying the exorbitant costs of living in DC. They can't be living in the outskirts in a neighboring state and be making that commute, right? They have to live in the expensive DC, so they're probably paying, and then room and board. It might be costing them, 30 to 40,000. So we're looking at over 100,000, right? Tuition will cost them 40,000 in total. So over 100,000 to attend, right? So if it's costing them 40,000, 30 to 40,000 a year for 3 years, we're talking about over 100,000. So roughly 150,000 for the 3 years of law school to go to UDC. If you're lucky, you're a resident. Now, for non-residents of DC, right, or the DMV, for non-residents, it's at the University of District of Columbia. That's unranked University of District of Columbia. By the way, this is not bashing their rankings, because they have a University of District of Columbia is set up on has a noble objective, a noble mission. It was established in 1986. The objective was to provide legal training, legal access to people who are low income, right? People, for poor people, right? So, although many people who are not poor go to the school, right? Law school is expensive. I don't think poor people go to law school in America. That's a fact. I have a friend who's going to be going. He's actually a millionaire, right? But he's elderly. He's already been successful, and he intends to go to University of District of Columbia because it's the cheapest, right? But he has a passion. He's always had a passion to study law. So for out-of-state people, it will cost, the tuition is over $25,000, right, for University of District of Columbia, right? So that's looking at over $75,000. So roughly over $200,000 for cost of attendance. So law school's going to be expensive, right? It's expensive regardless, right? So between 200,000 to over $500,000. That's for 3 years of law school. Now, in terms of paying off, right? It's an investment. In terms, education is an investment. Is it worth it? The Wall Street Journal in June 2023, published an article saying lawyers were the richest professionals in America, earned the most, right? They now earned more than investment bankers. People think medical doctors are the highest paid professionals. No, investment bankers are. People don't know who investment bankers are. They work on Wall Street. It used to be investment bankers, but in 2023, lawyers were now earning investment bankers. Lawyers in what they call big law. So when people graduate, they will go and work for the big law. There's these law firms, top 100. They're big law firms. If you make partners, so an example of names of big law would be Cravath, Wachtel, Davis Polk and Wardwell, Simpson Thatcher, so Debevoise and Kirkland and Ellis. So those are big law firms, right? And they're starting their new associates. That's people who just graduated from law school. Earn a base salary of $250,000, $250,000. If you get into big law, right? You just graduated from law school, you have no experience, they pay you $250,000 if you work for a big law firm. Now, and their partners make over $20 million a year. Rockstar litigators, private business, if they go into private practice, make over $20 million a year. So the Wall Street Journal reported that lawyers earn the most. So you can see it's the justification for why law school is extremely expensive. It pays off financially, right? It pays off financially. But again, people don't necessarily go to law school because of the money. I hope that's not why people go to law school. But everybody needs lawyers. Big businesses the trillionaire Elon Musk needs lawyers as well. So those people are willing to pay a lot more to be protected. Big corporations, unfortunately, the indigent people hardly have, poor people hardly have opportunities to access lawyers. So you take the LSAT, you get into law school. Law school is expensive, and because it's so expensive, right? Many people, most Americans require student loans. They obtain student loans. So the federal government provides student loans if you get into law school. So you can see, law school will cost you between 200,000 and $500,000 for 3 years of full-time study. There are some part-time programs, so people can work while they go to law school, but they're rare, and they're not many. You find them in places like DC, like metropolitan areas. DC, where it's the capital, so many people who work for the government, they end up going part-time. So it's still expensive. Takes a longer period, 4 years. But those are the fewer law schools. Not all, very few law schools offer a part-time program. So it's mainly full-time. So in big cities like DC, they have some part-time programs. So for government officials, people who are normally in government, and who realize that maybe they're in the FBI, so the people like that, they want to go to law school and become lawyers. It helps them. And GW has a part-time program, a small part-time programs, and it's normally filled with government officials and things like that. But and it takes a longer time. It will take you just maybe 1 year more. And so take the LSAT. That's important. Many people apply to many schools at the same time, right? Many people apply to many schools because they never know which one they'll get into. So because of, again, the cost of attendance it's very high. People normally need student loans, but of course the federal government only gives loans, and many banks will only give loans to people who are at least U.S. permanent residents, right? They have legal permanent residency. Now, if you're rich and you want to get an F1 student, then you have to show that you can pay for all 3 years of law school, that you could foot the bill, at least for the first year. So it's cost a lot. So if you're going to go to a place like George Washington University, right, then you have to show that you're going to cover, at least 120,000. And I think so it's very rare, right? There were one or two international students who came from China, right? But they came from very wealthy families, so they paid the entire thing, right off the bat. In fact, I think they had paid everything up front, right, for the whole 3 years. They came from very wealthy families. So I knew two people who came from China who were in my class at George Washington University, who went, they came from China. They were foreign students, they were F1 students, but they paid the entire, like almost $500,000, over $300,000, right? The parents, they came from very wealthy homes. So not everybody can pay the full bill. Most people would have to get a loan. The United States government will not only gives loans to U.S. citizens and permanent residents. It doesn't even give to people who have work permits. It wouldn't do that, right? So they're qualifying terms and conditions, and so that's it. I hope this is helpful. But again, law school is worth it. I'm glad I went to law school. I'm glad I graduated from law school and earned my Juris Doctor. And I'll do other videos and talk about the qualifying process to become a lawyer in other jurisdictions, like in the United Kingdom and in Nigeria. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I hope this was helpful. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.